Well, hang on. I gotta give her recording privileges first. Okay, we're ready.
Hello, Lizzie. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hey there.
James, do I have to hit anything specific to record?
Yes, you have to hit record.
Oh, there it is. Okay. Are you seeing my full PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. So my name's Lindsey Tibbitts. The topic I'm covering is building an interactive classroom resource. It'll be a calculus textbook, but inside the TiddlyWiki platform. So open educational resources, or OER, are assets with low costs, limited copyright restrictions that support teaching, learning, and assessment. Utilizing openly accessible resources in education is not a new concept. Many educational students have adopted OER solutions. One of the really popular ones is MIT's OpenCourseWare. That's actually been around for, I think, over 10 years now. Grants do exist that help the cover of transitioning from a traditional textbook or paper learning solution to these digital open source options. And the long-term costs are significantly less than a traditional textbook-based resource. OERs don't have to be digital, but for my project, we're going to focus on the digital version of a calculus textbook. A digital OER is more accessible and more easily integrates with other existing digital learning solutions. Technology has the ability to make a digital textbook more interactive and engaging for the reader. A study done by Castano, Munoz, Duarte, and Sancho Vinuesa confirmed that using the internet for interactive learning leads to a statistically significant improvement in academic achievement. The tools or strategies used by active reading can be considered interactivity within a textbook. Active reading expands on the traditional experience of just reading the words from left to right in a text until you hit the end and then moving on. These features include annotating, highlighting, commenting, and reorganizing or restructuring the material. Wikis enable users to co-generate, co-edit, and co-synthesize content and knowledge within a shared, openly available digital platform. A wiki features a structured set of pages linked in multiple ways to each other and to internet resources and an open editing system in which anyone can edit any page. TiddlyWiki is an open source wiki platform created by Jeremy Rustin. TiddlyWiki is stored in one file, meaning all the HTML, all the content, and all the styling, and it can be extended using plugins. The question I will try to answer is, how can we create a digital platform for undergraduate math education that enables students to write on and in the text? This project will focus on adapting the TiddlyWiki platform and an existing calculus open educational resource to build an interactive classroom resource. So this project will require researching any of the currently available OER calculus textbooks out there, and then selecting one to be used as the content for the project. OERs can come up in many different formats. Some of the ones I'll be looking at are EPUB, HTML, and the LaTeX format. I'm going to be investigating all three of these formats to determine the one most suitable for the project. Some of the considerations I have are the amount of rework required to retrofit the content within TiddlyWiki and the ability to easily break up the content into digestible tiddlers. The most basic unit in TiddlyWiki is called the tiddler. And one key issue that I know I'm going to run into, and I'll mention it again later, is finding the format that most closely fits the way code's written in TiddlyWiki. So I've chosen the TiddlyWiki for its affordances as both an authoring tool, specifically in its support for mathematical formulas through the JavaScript adaptation of LaTeX named KaTeX, and a student tool through the abilities to write on and in and tag the text. TiddlyWiki is a nonlinear content platform that allows authors to organize and present complex information. It is lightweight and requires no client-side software for its use. I plan to also use Node.js as an authoring platform and render the final product in a static version for instructors and students to use. Students are increasingly adopting new roles as producers, commentators, and classifiers. TiddlyWiki affords creators and readers of the text the ability to annotate, transclude, and tag the text. These affordances help to better organize and access information. It can show how concepts are related to others. Annotations within a mathematical textbook allow the reader to mark hints and reminders of certain formulas. With the addition of ka-tex, special case formulas or examples can be included inside TiddlyWiki. In a paper-based textbook, a person's annotations are limited to marginal space or squeezed in between the lines. Online or e-textbooks afford the user nearly unlimited annotation and note-taking space. Annotations afford the reader the ability to create a personal, custom version of the text that suits their needs. Within TiddlyWiki, annotations can stand out and be organized by the user to make review and retrieval simpler. Through annotations and tagging, readers can associate and organize text in many ways to make the content more meaningful to the individual reader and their educational goals. Transclusion affords reuse by allowing content creators to include existing text or subsets of it in new content without duplication. Removing the reliance on cut and paste helps to ensure consistent content and messages, and also simplifies content updates. An update to a piece of content that is transcluded in many other places automatically propagates to all its references. One origin, one update. TiddlyWiki is designed for reuse through the affordances to create references or include content in many places without duplication through transclusion. An example of this reuse in the context of a Wikified mathematics textbook would be transcluding formulas. A formula in like a mathematical textbook is frequently referenced in one place and then referenced in all future places by the number in parentheses that they put next to the formula. In TiddlyWiki, we can improve upon that by further down the text, anywhere a formula is referenced, we can then show it either automatically or by user command, so that way they don't have to flip back to remember what that formula is. Sorry, I'm going to show you guys the demo that I did last semester with Zora, with a little bit of her math concept. So Zora gave me some of her lectures and quizzes, and then I put them inside TiddlyWiki and kind of played around with some of the affordances and the look and feel of what a textbook would be like. So here's an example of a lecture, and I have them tagged so that way I could organize them by the content type, what module they were associated to. And I, did some coloring to differentiate definitions, examples. But one of the fun things was here, a formula was defined, and then further you'll see the other number ones, and when you click on them, the equation's readily available. Where in a regular textbook, you'd have to either flip back if it's on a different page or search back through to get it. And I think this will be one of the things that I want to improve upon, as well as adding some other features. From the code point of view, you'll see here anything in between the dollar signs is going to be the ka-tex, and it's almost identical in many cases to how LaTeX is written, so math students and math professors will be very familiar with it when it comes to actually creating the content. So once I identify the ideal calculus textbook that's available for my project, I'm going to import it in a fresh TiddlyWiki running on Node.js on my local computer. I then plan to make any retrofits or adjustments to the content and convert any LaTeX to COTEC as necessary. Like I mentioned, COTEC is based on LaTeX and supports many of the LaTeX commands, but it does not have full support, and a few of the commands work a little bit differently. We'll then focus on design adjustments to make the look and feel readable and similar to traditional textbooks, while adding features such as annotations, formula reference, and so on. I think one of the biggest challenges I'll run into will be at the beginning when I'm actually selecting the OER. I'm limited only to the existing content with the right copyright I need to allow me to make modification and reuse the content. In addition to that, no format I find will import into TiddlyWiki as a one-for-one. There will either be changes I'll have to make to the text in the HTML or changes that I'll have to make in the formulas. Another challenge will be the formula reference. The version I implemented in my POC with Zora worked really nice on the user's end, but it wasn't ideal for a content creator. I will try to find a way to improve that to make it more usable and less cumbersome. I think finding the key features to include and implement that have the biggest impact and that I can fit in my timeline will be a challenge. So I hope to be able to identify those and define a clear scope before I get too deep into development. That's it. Questions?
I have a couple questions. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Terrific. So what formats are available for you to bring into your environment? For instance, and this is very self-serving, I realize, but I have lots and lots of lectures in Microsoft Word, for instance. Do those port into your format?
The text from Microsoft Word definitely would. The formulas, because the way the formulas, if you wrote them inside Word, how they pop out when you're editing them, those won't port over, so those would have to be rewritten by hand.
Oh, that's all the work. You know,
Yeah.
it's math text, so that's difficult.
Yeah, I haven't found anything yet, although I haven't put a ton of research into it. But as of yet, I haven't found anything that would
And
translate.
was I seeing in the work that you've done so far, was I seeing any tables or figures?
Yeah, I can pull that back up.
I saw lots of formulas.
Yeah, I believe some of them we had figures. It's remembering which module has it is probably.
Okay, we're seeing some things there.
Yeah.
Now, presumably you have the power to make these things interactive as well, right? So if I had a slider and I could move A from left to right, I don't know if what section you're in. Maybe you're getting close to Laplace transforms here.
Yeah.
So, you know, it would be kind of fun to change a parameter in a function, see how the Laplace transform responds, that sort of thing.
That's definitely good to
Is that the sort of capability you're looking for, or are you looking for more of a static presentation?
I think at least definitely the end goal would be to add as much interactivity as possible. Otherwise, you know, I want to separate it as much from a traditional textbook as possible, in that I want it to still have the look and feel so it's familiar, but add those affordances that technology gives us, like interactivity. So yeah, that kind of interactivity I'll definitely note and look into when I'm defining the features that I'm going to work on.
Terrific. And I saw some quizzes there. Are your quizzes algorithmically generated in the sense that does each student get their own sort of version of the quiz?
This one was not. It was just static, but that's definitely something that
The environment affords that?
I would think so. Steve, what do you think about that? Yeah.
Yeah, because it's because what it does is it kind of intermixes. It's almost like SQL types of queries into the LaTeX.
Right.
Okay.
It is KTech basically. So yeah, and so you can mix and match at every different variable level.
Nice.
Yeah, it's kind of, but you know, Bill, the idea of interactivity was when you were talking about that, I was beginning to think, now that's really interesting. Another sort of radically different approach to the whole project could be, instead of trying to write a whole textbook, you might try to write a series of innovations. And something like you're suggesting, that's an innovation. We might pick like 3 or 4 or 5 cool things to do and do them. I love the idea of a completed textbook, but at some point there'll be choices to make.
Yeah. We can either make a polished textbook or, take a chapter or 2 of content and really make it cool.
Yeah, and so, and I don't know, that's kind of an up to you question, or, but yeah, it could go either way. The platform, yeah, I kind of like the idea of doing the multiple innovations in some ways, because that frees you up to really think about the theory questions that you were asking about. What is interactivity? What is active reading? And what can we do to make that better?
Yep.
And then people who make textbooks for a living will take your ideas and make a textbook out of it.
That's true. Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, because really they need the ideas. They've got that. So yeah. So either way, I could see it going either direction.
Yeah, I know one thing I was thinking about when I was kind of looking at this today is I'd love to, I know that you can make this menu go away, but to use that space not to widen the tiddler, but to have some kind of dedicated annotation space on the side would be really cool.
Yeah, you've like barely touched the surface of what you can do in the space in the wiki, because it's, once you take away the theme and you start working on your own theme, it's scary because it's all gone.
Yeah.
Hard to get it back sometimes. But yes, I've seen, and I don't know if you've seen the annotator I built last spring. I'll say, yeah, the Vandendorp annotator was all text-based, but the concepts of how you create an annotation, you have to attach it to something so that you know that they're linked. And so building the links you have to link your annotations to something or associated with something in the text, and getting that right is tricky.
Right.
And then they have to get named, and then they have to be searchable and findable, and so I didn't mean to stop Bill's questions because they were really interesting. So you should keep talking, Bill.
Yeah.
I do have another question as we've been talking. Here's something I found. I'm doing a little project with Coursera these days, and I just assumed people would be sitting at PCs. And then, the further I got into it, the more I realized that a lot of this stuff is just happening on people's phones these days. So are you sort of cognizant of that? What's your target platform?
That is a good question. I don't think I've necessarily defined a target platform, although at least
you're HTML5 compliant, so you don't care, which is
that's true.
We've never talked about it because it shouldn't matter.
Right, because by default it should be mobile optimized, right?
You're willing to do this on a 4.5-inch screen, pay for it, kind of thing. I mean, so in a sense, and so you kind of have an imagination, but you're not going to design for it at this point.
Interesting. Okay.
It's like it's in there.
Yeah.
So you're figuring laptops anyway.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're not even figuring.
Yeah,
maybe you're saying that that's not your job.
You can't write code to a 5.5-inch screen and so you just make it HTML5 compliant, which automatically adjusts it to the screen and the user preferences. People screw up. They change whatever. People who are serious about it change their preferences and they make it work. So as long as you can write to something that they can deal with,
yep,
make it work.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I do have another question, if we could zoom out a little bit as far as theory goes. If you decide rather than to do the broad text and rather do, several innovations, are you into the literature to know that, changing parameters in a figure actually does enable better user outcomes, better learner outcomes?
Not specifically with that, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. I read a lot about having the user actually involved in the reading in some way, like that example, changing the parameters does change things significantly in terms of like retention and actual like absorption of the information.
Yeah, because it seems like you're developing a lot of technical competence on this project, and that's a terrific thing. And I think you're also telling me that learning theory is coming into the project explicitly as well.
Yeah.
Is it? Very good. That's terrific. Now, how long did it take you to get up to speed on this?
This was kind of like my final project of spring. What were you saying, Steve?
How long is it going to take you to get to the next level? I'm sorry, that was a good question.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, this level that you're seeing now, and for me, I think was pretty simple to get up and running. Granted, my undergraduate degrees dual computer science and math, and I have about 7 years of software development under my belt. So messing around with this kind of stuff is more familiar to me. So I don't think the learning curve will be that difficult. But the one thing that I want to focus on is whatever I implement, making it easy for people that aren't as programmatically inclined as I am, so they can.
Right.
So what do you mean by that? So because you I had a question when you were talking about wikis and you were calling them collaborative, which is one flavor of what wiki means. But what do you mean by you want to make it easy for other people to modify? So you seem to have an audience that you're writing for other than students?
Well, yeah, my thought was that, some of the kind of the innovations that I design would be used in other textbooks, not just this one.
So the concept of the innovation or the code?
The code.
Which does seem important. Getting past the implementation seems like that would be helpful to other professors.
Right, because if this caught on and someone wanted to kind of build out their own learning environment inside TiddlyWiki using some of the things I created, if, they're a math professor, science professor, an English professor, and don't have a ton of technical background, I want it to be obviously not simple, but usable to them where they don't need someone like me supporting them every step of the way while they're creating the content.
That's a different thesis. Unfortunately, I think that's just a different project. So if you spend time sort of building an interface that others can use who have less competence, then you're building an interface for them. But if you want to build a product, then I think you have to build a product for you. And if somebody wants to replicate your work, they can open up the hood and all your code is there. And so I could figure out what you're doing, and I'd learn by following your code. But I think it's perfectly reasonable to make a GitHub repository and say, hey, go for it. Here you go. That's the nature of open source. I don't think you have to, the more documentation you can provide, the nicer it will be, the better variables, better variable names you use, all the things to make it easier for other people to follow. But ultimately, I don't think you have to worry about creating an environment for somebody else to follow, like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. That's like,
yeah, I didn't mean going that far, and I wasn't planning to put like a UI on top of it. Okay. Just making sure as I'm building, the code or the features that they're at least a little bit self-explanatory. Like just being cognizant of it, that it's not just for me, just like any developer should be.
Yeah. So I can show you something that I've implemented a couple of times, and sometimes I turn it on, sometimes I maintain it, but it's a macro that's like a documentation macro. And so you can turn it on or off, and so you can leave the documentation in your code, and if it's visible, then all the documentation shows up, and then you can make it invisible and it all goes away. And then that level of being conscious, and then because it's all written in your code, if you want to grab all your documentation and say, here's all my notes, TiddlyWiki, that's easy too. So it's kind of like self-annotating.
Yeah, that would be cool.
In that discipline, and then you build it in the code, that's good. But again, I think you're, as it's December 10th, you can let some of the time. So, yeah.
Okay.
There's a long career after this particular thesis, right?
Yeah.
Plenty of other opportunities.
Yeah, no, and I would really encourage you to do it in GitHub. once you, I mean, or something like that. But GitHub works pretty well, although I keep screwing it up always. But yeah, it's and the one other, I think I put something in the chat, pandoc.org. Have I sent you there before?
I think you've mentioned it. I haven't been to the website yet, though.
Yeah, you'll want that. And to Bill's question, it does take Word, so I've never seen what it does, and you just run some Word files. So if you've got files, send some files with equations along. Just we'll see what happens to them.
Okay.
I'd be kind of curious to see what TiddlyWiki does with it. So TiddlyWiki uses pandoc by going from whatever format you have to HTML. Then you use the text slicer edition to import the HTML. And you might find it easier to do the structure of the document in Word or LaTeX or something like that, than it is to do it in TiddlyWiki. You have to, there's a balance.
Right.
And then
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to find with all these different directions I can go. Yeah.
It's really hard. Yeah. And some of the EPUBs, it depends on how well designed the EPUB was, how nicely documented it is. But I have a feeling that the LaTeX is going to be better for you because of the formulas.
Yeah.
Yeah. EPUB, you're going to have to rekey the formulas, and that's a non-starter.
Yep.
Yeah. So. Yeah,
and that's why if I'll have to really think about whether or not I want to do the whole textbook or focus on the innovations, because then rewriting some of it wouldn't be so much of a concern because it'd be a much smaller content.
And then you may not be rewriting, you might be writing. Bill, do you have I think if you've got 3 cool things that you wish a math textbook that was written in TiddlyWiki could do.
I can certainly think about that.
Yeah. And I would, by the way, SVG graphics, are you familiar with those?
No.
Lindsey, do you know the SVG stuff?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
So you can fully draw graphics with code. Shapes and lines and colors and everything can be written, so it's all full code, so there's no...
Well, if you're going to use HTML5, you could just use Canvas. It's the more
thank you.
updated version of that.
So is Canvas just a bunch of code?
Yeah. And it's basically the same thing as a lot of the stuff from SVG graphics was ported over, but it's just research Canvas.
Yeah, Canvas can do animations too, right?
Oh, okay. Oh, that would be cool. Canvas would be really cool. I'd love to see it.
I remember that now.
If we don't have an interpreter for TiddlyWiki, we can get one, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that some guy will dream up and build. So thanks. So any other questions from anybody? Sorry we didn't open it up to everybody else there. I apologize for that. Lindsey, this is good stuff. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you, guys. Thank you.